Okay, let's talk about my favorite books of the year so far. I've read, I think 29. I think I'm on 30. I'm not sure. So 29 to 30, so I've read a lot this year. And I think I've had a pretty good reading year. I feel like I totally threw myself into reading because this year's been crazy, but I've also been doing all these other creative projects like making videos and doing some art projects, and I've been having a good time. Like, I think doing all this stuff in the face of like total terror is really nice. So, let's talk about these books. A big chunk of my favorite books so far this year have been from the Booker Prize long list, the International Booker Prize long list, and I was setting out to read the whole long list. I didn't get there, but that's okay because out of the 6 books I read from the long list, or maybe 7, 4 made it onto the short list. So, one of those is Under the Eye of the Big Bird by Hiromi Kawakami, and this is a collection of short stories, and it's really strange. It takes place basically in the future, and essentially all these stories are about humanity's extinction, or like the last little bits of humanity. I just left the frame, sorry about that. And so they're very strange. Like, one, they like fly. One, all their names are numbers, so there's like a lot going on here, and you're not really sure how they all relate to each other until the end of the book. And when I finished this book, I was like, immediately, I want to read it again. And I still have it on library loan. It's like fully overdue at this point, but I'm gonna hold on to it until I can read it again, because there's something about just like going in and not knowing anything and how the stories all connect to each other, and then finding it out at the end. It sort of recontextualized the rest of the stories for me. So I definitely want to reread that. Did you hear that? I'm like, is my cat behind this? I don't know. Let's continue. And this did make it to the shortlist. This also made it to the shortlist. It's Perfectioin by Vincenzo Latronico. I've been saying the name wrong like every single time, so hopefully that's right. But this is a short and sweet book published by NYRB, and I loved this book. I loved this book so much. It's about Anna and Tom. They're 2 expats. They live in Berlin. They do like digital marketing, and they have the perfect apartment. It's like kind of industrial. They have plants everywhere. They have a Radiohead vinyl. I felt kind of called out because they have a New Yorker subscription. Like, all of these things that are sort of signals of like cool millennial success. And I think that's part of the point of this book. It kind of calls out millennials in a way, and also kind of calls them in. So I think this is a must read for millennials. Basically, Anna and Tom, as they get older, their friends start to move away, and they start to think like, this place in Berlin is not really feeling like what it used to be. So they go out and search for the next place that's going to have that sort of same feeling for them. So they go to Lisbon, and then they realize that everything's exactly the same. This book was really, really amazing. I really love it, and I think it might be, maybe, our winner. I'm not ready to fully give my predictions yet, but this could be it. I don't know. This book did not make the short list. It's called Hunchback by Saou Ichikawa, and this book is so interesting because it basically ends right when it feels like it's getting started. It's a story about a disabled woman who uses writing sort of as an escape, and she writes a lot about like smut, and one day someone finds her Twitter account where she writes all her fantasies, and can you imagine? Like, it's so wow. But oh my god, there's so much in the story, and I don't want to give it away. It's so short. I read it in one sitting, and I kind of can't stop thinking about this. I think I might reread this one as well. Part of what was so compelling about it is, like, it almost ends on a cliffhanger, if that makes sense. And I don't know. Excellent book. It, like, ends short, and that's what makes it compelling. Alright, this also did not make the short list, but I really like this as well. This is called Eurotrash by Christian Kracht, and it's basically like a buddy road trip novel about a man and his mom who's sort of dying, and their goal to give away all of their money because the mom made her money from weapons investment and her grandfather was a Nazi. So, yeah. It's really interesting, and for the first, like, 50 pages of the book, it was a lot of lore dumping. Like, it's kind of slightly autobiographical, and I was like, okay, well, you know, I understand, like, we're getting some basis for the story, but I almost DNF'd, I almost closed the book and was done with it, but I'm so happy I stuck with it because it's really funny, and there's also a lot of charm in this book that I was not expecting. So I highly recommend this book as well. Okay, On the Calculation of Volume was stunning, and it's a septtology. So this is the first of 7 books. I think only the first 2 are published right now in English, and the second 2 are coming out on November 18th, which is really interesting because this book takes place on November 18th and only on November 18th. It's essentially the story about a woman who steps out of time, and when I was reading this book, I was staying at my parents' house for a week while they were traveling, and it was a really sort of strange experience because I haven't stayed at my parents' house since like I last lived there, which was, I lived there during COVID, but like before that growing up, so it's been a really long time. And I don't know, like this woman, she sort of has hope that things will change. She hopes that she's gonna get out of this time loop, and she talks to her husband about it. And I was talking to my partner, and they were just like, you have to wait until you get to the end of like the week and then you'll come home, but it almost felt like I was stuck. And so that's what made this a really interesting reading experience for me, and I highly recommend this one. This one might win as well. It's definitely having a moment. You should pick it up. Okay, Drive Your Plow for the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk was, I think, the first book that I read this year, or one of the first ones, and it's so good. It's so good. I actually was reading it at the same time as it was kind of having a moment because Pedro Pascal was photographed reading it on the beach, and Dua Lipa read it for her book club. Now, I read it just on my own volition. Like, I had wanted to read it for a while, and I just decided to pick it up. But this is the story about a small town, and basically all these men sort of start to disappear and turn up dead. And the main character, Janina, like the first one to go is her neighbor, and she finds him with her other neighbor, and she's convinced that they're all being punished because they're hunters. Now, Janina is one of the most memorable characters that I've ever read in a book. She uses astrology to predict things. She's like an older woman that no one really takes seriously, and hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, I'll say that. It was so good. Definitely read it, and it convinced me to read more Olga Tokarczuk. I'm so fascinated by her writing, and yeah, excellent book. Oh my god. This book, Luminous by Sylvia Park, is an amazing book. Wow. I finished this week and I'm stunned. It's like totally ambitious. It's a wonderful debut author, and that always is so exciting to me because there's like a hunger there, and I don't know, there's almost like something to prove. And Sylvia Park, they absolutely nailed this book. Okay, Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb was so good. I'm not the biggest fantasy reader. I feel like it takes a lot for me to be in the right mindset for fantasy and for a fantasy book to really hook me. Like, I haven't read that much because a lot hasn't really interested me. Anyways, a lot of people, some good friends, told me to read Assassin's Apprentice and the Farseer trilogy. They said it's a bit more literary, and I really loved it. And I don't know, it just, there's something about the world that I kept wanting to go back to, and I think it was the characters. I think that Robin Hobb does really good character work, specifically Fitz Chivalry, who's the main character, and he's the bastard son of the prior king in waiting. who passes away. And so the current king takes him under his wing and essentially trains him to be an assassin and use him as like a pawn, because he feels that if he doesn't use him and he doesn't bring him in, then somebody else will use him against them. This book really takes it to the next level. Fitz is growing up a bit, and he has to learn a lot about his priorities and where his loyalties lie, and he has a love interest that feels real, you know? He's still like a kind of immature teenager, but he has to sort of reckon with, you know, the consequences and the sacrifices you have to make to be in a relationship. And I think that it's, I don't know, there's just so much to it that's like, I haven't found a typical standard fantasy. This book is so political. Basically, like, the king is sick in this one, and there's two brothers. There's there's Prince Verity, who is sort of like really focused on protecting the kingdom from all this stuff. And then there's Prince Regal, who really just isn't interested in like anything except for getting power. And so there's two like weighing forces. And, you know, I'm not going to talk about what happens at the end of the first book, but there's a lot of fallout after what happens at the end of the first book. So I don't know, I think it's a great fantasy series if you aren't, you know, really sure as to what fantasy books to read, or if you're really interested in fantasy, this is a book that I think everyone can read. The Invention of Moral by Adolfo Casares was a book that I started reading and I actually stopped, and it's ironic because it's so short, it's just about 100 pages, but something just didn't catch my attention the first time. So I decided to pick it up again, and it is a total fever dream, excellent book to read in the summer on the beach when it's so hot. In a video that I made previously on TikTok, I talked about like summer book recommendations, and I highly recommended The Stranger by Albert Camus for that same sort of like heat delusion. And I think that this book is totally in the same vein as that. And I don't know, like if it's really hot, like you start acting crazy. Like I know I do. So, or I just get really pissed off. So this book is a story about a man who's on a deserted island. He did some crime that we're not really sure. He's like kind of on the run, and he's hiding, and he's, you know, really exposed to the sun all the time and doesn't really have shelter. And then one day this group of people show up. Well, something's weird about this group of people. Are they real? Is he real? Is he hallucinating? There's a lot of questions that arise in this book, and there's a lot of really good in this book. There's also, there's also illustrations which are done by the author himself, which really help to like visualize certain things. For example, in this picture, there's two suns. I wonder what that's about. And I think that this book was really amazing. And I think that every single book I've read that's been published by NYRB has been totally memorable. And I think they're definitely my favorite publisher. And last but certainly not least is my favorite book of the year, Open Heaven by Seán Hewitt. This book is absolutely stunning. Thankfully, I was gifted it by the publisher, and I was talking to the publisher. I DM'd him after I read the intro, the prologue, and I was like, wow. It's so lyrical, and it's so vivid, and it's so real. Like, I don't know. Books sometimes have the power to transport you somewhere new, and this book totally took me to this beautiful English countryside with light sort of diffusing over leaves and smells of spring and green and just like, oh my god, it's so beautiful. It's sort of like a queer coming of age novel in the vein of Young Mungo by Douglas Stewart. It's very different though, and it follows sort of like a non-traditional story. Basically, our main character is out and he's gay, but he's kind of just like keeps to himself. He's not totally bullied, but he's definitely ostracized for being gay and not like totally welcomed. So his dad gets him to work a job, and I think it's like delivering paper, and on the route and where he does the job, he meets this new guy in town, and they strike up a friendship, and our main character is totally in love with him, and we're not sure if it's like reciprocal, and the other character. There's some weirdness about his father, and like there's parts of this book that are genuinely terrifying, which is so unexpected. But Seán Hewitt is a poet, and literally every sense of the word, he is a poet. And his memoir, All Down Darkness Wide, was the first book I read by him, and it's absolutely mind-blowing, amazing. And I knew that Open Heaven would be amazing. I just didn't know how much I would love it. So I actually might go to an author talk tonight with Seán Hewitt if I can get my act together. But wow, yeah, this is a total must read. So I don't know. I have a lot of other books that I've read this year that have been amazing, but those are the ones that just really stood out to me. And I could talk about my current read. Let me just go grab it. So this is Audition by Katie Kitamura, and I haven't read any of her books before. This book, like, I don't know, the premise doesn't sound that interesting, but last night when I was reading it and I started it, I was like, okay, I'm just going to read one more chapter and then I'm going to be done. And then I got to the end of the chapter and then I was like, okay, I'm just going to read one more chapter and then I'll be done. I promise after this one. And then I ended up reading half the book. So there's something about this that's really compelling, and I'm not sure what it is. And I think that I'm going to read this for the rest of the day.